I do see the point.
No, I just got to finish the story, just so you know. Cut it out of the interview, you don't want, but you got to know what the truth is. So around the 1860s...
We won't cut it out of the interview. So tougher to be a politician versus a corporate banker?
Much tougher.
Should India allow same-sex marriage?
This is Palanivel Thiaga Rajan for Brut.
The Finance Minister of Tamil Nadu, Mr. Palanivel Thiaga Rajan, thank you so much for speaking to Brut today.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you, we'll get to the finance bit and everything else in just a few seconds, but I'm going to ask you my favorite question via social media. For a long time, I believe from 2016 to 2021, you were also heading the DMK IT wing. Tell us something, tell the common man something about social media that they don't know.
It is more powerful than you think in some ways, and much less powerful than you think in other ways. In the sense that, especially YouTube, in my understanding, is probably the single kind of most widely watched medium anywhere. And that's largely because almost all the phones sold in India, Android phones, and they come with YouTube already installed, and you don't need an account, you don't need to register. So the utilization and reach of YouTube is amazing, phenomenal. Like, you know, I've been recognized on the streets of Perth, Western Australia, or Toronto, or London, or someplace, because YouTube is just ubiquitous, particularly in the Tamil diaspora and Tamil community. On the other hand, if you think you can win even an MLA election, just because you dominate social media, you're completely wrong. Right? What voters want on the ground is personal connect. I think social media has a couple of advantages. It's the ultimate democratic medium. Anybody who wants can start a channel or start a handle or a page, right? And as attractive as you can make yourself be, you get followers. So it doesn't require large investment in infrastructure like having a TV channel or radio station. That's the good news. The bad news is because the entry cost is zero, you can find a lot of nonsense, right? And it's a bit surprising. Think about it this way. There are huge propaganda factories out there. In fact, in my opinion, the real propaganda machines are not social media, not WhatsApp, not Facebook and Twitter. It's the TV channels and the newspapers that can be bought. Because people assume that if they see it on a computer, it may or may not be true. Or on a phone. But when they see it on TV, they think it's true. In fact, it's completely not the case. There's huge amounts of propaganda on traditional media.
It's democratic, can't win elections, but super important. Just one quick question more on social media, and what I want to ask you is that do you think social media platforms have a lot of power and they need some kind of supervision and censoring?
I have changed my mind in the last 2 weeks, right, or about 2 months, ever since the Twitter take private. It's very clear that one individual can do whatever he or she wants, at least for a long time before the regulators really swing into action. So, I used to think that the market had a natural equilibrium and wouldn't allow like crazies to kind of, you just have drop-off rates and people wouldn't congregate at places run by crazies, I thought. But now I'm not so sure anymore. So maybe I think there should be some, I'm not saying there should be censorship, I'm not saying there should be deep regulation, but I think there should be some accountability.
I'm going to change tracks slightly, and in an interview with me, Kanimori Karunanidhi told me she's an atheist. She doesn't believe in God. You are known to be a staunch Hindu. I want to ask you, does it bother you? How do the dynamics work? The party that you belong to, the people heading it are atheists.
Yes or no? I mean, this is a very interesting question, right? I don't flaunt my faith. I happen to be a believer. I am a very low-level believer compared to devout believers in the sense that I don't believe in many rituals. I don't believe in being in one place at one day. I don't believe in eating some things on some day and not some other day. I don't believe that only if I attend the highly popular festival, I will get the grace of God. I believe in my own way, and that belief is constant across time, date, cuisine. Everything. I don't change there's not like, this is the most auspicious day, so I should. That's my way of believing. Other people may believe differently. My mother follows all those times. I don't. So the whole point of self-respect and individual choice is that all of us can coexist.
What happens when that clashes? And we've seen A. Raja come out in news and, he said you are a Shudra, prostitute's son till you remain a Hindu. What do you do in a situation like this?
Mr. Raja has his own interpretation. Mr. Raja comes from a community that has been oppressed for hundreds, if not thousands of years. He has an interpretation based on his understanding and his life and his reading of the papers, of the documents. He's entitled to his view. His view doesn't have to affect me in any way. His view is his view. My view is my view. The party didn't call all of us and say, reconcile your views because we have to stand on a religious platform. We are standing on a social justice, financial inclusion, progress, education, uplift. Those views have to be common, otherwise we can't stand on the same platform.
You'd call Jaggi Vasudevan a charlatan. Why did you take on Jaggi Vasudev and call him that? I want to understand that. And my supplementary question I'm just going to put there as well. I want to understand your party has been talking about has been against Free the Temple movement. It's been there for a while. I want to understand whether there was a connect between the two.
There's a lot to unpack there. Let's go one step at a time. Let's do the trivial stuff first. I don't have the time or the necessity to take on Jaggi Vasudev. I think Jaggi Vasudev is a vile, despicable charlatan. I have always thought that. That view hasn't changed. That's a personal view. It's not the view that is integral to my job as finance minister or human resource minister or planning and development minister or economic statistics. I have a lot of portfolios.
But would you elaborate on
in the sense that the main views that I had expressed were when I was an opposition member, right? Because it came up in an interview about the Free the Temples, allegedly. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. So in the course of that, I said, if I was ever going to argue with somebody about temple privatization or nationalization, the last guy I would argue with is this guy, because he's not fit to be qualified as, in any way special status to talk about temples. Who is he? He sells tickets for 5,000, 50,000, 5 lakhs. Somebody told me he was sitting in the fanciest box at the World Cup in Qatar at the final in the greatest hospitality suite, right? Whatever business he's in seems to be a good business, right? He's in business. So that guy, I said, was not the right guy for me to be answering what the status of temples ought to be. He had no special status to be the counterparty on my argument. That's the only reason I had touched him before I got into office. I made the mistake in the office. The first interview was from a newspaper that asked me a series of questions about the finances, about the status, and incidentally asked me, what is your view on this guy? I said, my view has not changed. But this is not a ministerial view. This is a personal view that I had before I came to office. And he's still a charlatan. What the reporter did, he first took that and ran one headline on that 2 days after I became minister, as if that was my highest priority in life. And then ran a second piece 3 days later with all the details of the finances and all the stuff. So it was never in my ambition to even touch on the guy. I have nothing to do with him. He's not a good person. My views have not changed. A lot of complaints have come, but it's not my day job. There's a lot of evil in the world. I'm not designated to be the evil fighter. Let's take the Madurai Meenakshi Amman temple or Tirupati or, take big temples. Padmanabhaswamy temple is a good one. Who do these temples belong to? Who do they belong to?
The people.
Yeah, but who did they belong? No, who did they belong to? They belong to the kings.
Kings. Okay, I see what you're saying.
So when they were with the kings used them both as a source of patronage as well as a source of divinity or claiming divinity. I am the
Closeness
protector of
God.
the temple, therefore I am closer to God. This is how it happened in churches, in kings, in mosques and kings. Everywhere the ruling elite were with the temples and had ownership. Just like they had ownership of the kingdom, they had ownership of the temple. This is the history. Right? Now you take the Madurai temple, Madurai Meenakshi Amman temple in my constituency. At some point it was largely built by the Pandya kings and their predecessors. At some point it fell into the hands of the Chera kings.
Right.
At some other point it fell into the hands of the Cholas when they took over all of it. At some other point it fell into the hands of the Muslim Khiljis who came down, the generals who came down from the Mughal Empire and then decided to run independently without paying rent to the Delhi Empire. Then it got taken over by the Vijayanagaram kings, Nayak kings, who took over and ran. And then the Nayak kings went and the East India Company came. And then the East India Company took over the temple. Right?
Right.
So all of this, who now owns the temple? You go from East India Company to government of the United Kingdom, the Queen, and then to independence. Who should own this temple?
I do see the point
No,
you're
I
making.
just got to finish the story, just so you know. Cut it out of the interview, you don't want, but you got to know what the truth is.
We won't cut it out of the interview.
Yeah.
But,
Around the 1860s, a whole bunch of people went and complained to the after the British East India Company was found to be doing extremely bad things, and the Crown cancelled the charter, and the government, the Queen took over the Kingdom of India directly. After the first charter ran full, the second charter was cancelled halfway, thrown out, government took assets. Minute the government took all the control, a lot of people went and complained to the viceroys, the governor generals, and said these temples are being turned into dens of bad activity. The state needs to take them over. So in the 1890s or so, in the Madras presidency, a committee of eminent Brahmin gentlemen was formed to go look into the issue. And they came back and gave a report and said, yes, there is no clear ownership, there is no clear trusteeship. Small temple, my land, my jameen, my panay, I know, it's my family's.
right.
But the king's temple, there is no king left. Right? So they recommended that the crown should take them over. And they should be regulated and run through government-controlled trusts. So when you say free the temples, I ask 2 or 3 questions. Free it from whom? And give it to whom? Right? If you say, is the department less than ideal? Yes, all departments are less than ideal. If you say, is going to be given, who should we give it to? Why should I give it to Jaggi Vasudev? Is he a special status human being? Who will I give it to? Then there's a bigger problem. If this is going to be the basis for whatever is to be kind of plus or minus, where will I elect or select or justify constitutionally who gets to manage or own a temple that belonged only to the king?
I think, Mr. Minister, we'll probably need a day at least to talk about this. But I do think that there is also a little bit of contradiction in the story that you told me and what we are discussing on Free the Temples. But like
what
I said,
the
contradiction would be that if you look at, and I don't mean to get into the Hindu, Muslim, Christianity debate here, but because we are talking about Free the Temple movement, you do have other religious sects.
Good point.
Monuments which are not under the state. That's one portion of it.
Nothing is under the state. No, let's be very clear. The HRC board operates independently. We appoint officers, but their employees don't shift. They don't be one day PWD, one day HRC, one day housing. HRC is HRC. The ministers from the government, but everybody else operates. I think the top 2 officers like commissioner and all that change, but everybody else is within the department, number 1. Number 2, there is a Waqf board. The Waqf board is also administered by the government of Tamil Nadu. All the ancient mosques are with the Waqf. Number 3, the Christian churches, the British government was smart enough that they brought the Church Nationalisation Act while they were here itself. And by nationalisation, they set up the Church of South India, the Church of North India, the diocese, and they moved all the churches out of the Church of England and out of independent hands into these boards by themselves. Now the question is, are those boards regulated less rigorously than the HR&CE board? The answer is maybe. But that is why we, along with other states, are now passing new legislation. We already passed one and it was withdrawn for different reasons.
I would love to talk to you about this much longer, but I have to get on to some fun questions, as I call them, because we have a young audience and I'd really like to know your views on this. So moving away from politics for a little bit, I went through your website and it says, stay current with computer, networking and audio systems technology, can set up, repair most current home use level systems. So my team wants to know, can you fix a mixer grinder for dosa idli?
No, that was probably true till only about 3-4 years ago. I used to be an engineer and I'm pretty good with my hands and I can dismantle and connect things up. But the technology around networking and IoT and all has changed so dramatically in the last 2-3 years that I probably can't keep up. But till about 2016, 17, 18, I was probably current.
Okay.
So it's tough. Now it's too much.
Was hands-on, now it's too much with technology changing. You've of course worked with Standard Chartered, Lehman, others. You have an MBA, you've done an MS from the US as well. Can you tell us some similarities about being a politician, being in politics, holding a portfolio, and being in the corporate sector?
In fact, this morning when I flew up from Chennai, my next seat was a very senior executive in the media space.
Okay.
And before that, he had worked in the FMCG space, globally and in India. Same guy, FMCG, media. And we were talking and he was saying, you know, some things are similar, some things are different. And I said, actually, the higher up I go in a large organization, the more I realized some things are common across all large organizations. Right? What it takes is vision, administrative kind of skills, understanding of human psychology, organizational design, behavior, alignment of incentives, you know, the capacity to manage large complex systems requires roughly the same skill. I'm not talking about politics now. I'm saying if you're actually sitting as a minister and running a department that has tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of employees, or in my case, finance department that oversees, I don't know, a 4 lakh crore budget and in a 30 lakh crore economy or 25 lakh crore economy, then it comes down to only 3 or 4 things. Can you manage the org structure, the design, the vision, the alignment of incentives, the people part right? Can you manage the fisc, the balance sheet, the debt equity ratio equivalent, the interest revenue ratio, the debt to GDP right? And can you get the execution skill? Can you have the right workforce with the right talent at the right place to deliver the outcome?
Right.
In some sense, all large organizations, from large media companies to large software companies to large banks to large government, it comes down to these skills and it comes down to these attributes. In the government, in general, we have 2-3 limitations because political selection processes, whether it's election or nomination, are not based on your resume.
So tougher to be a politician versus a corporate banker?
Much, much, much tougher.
All right, you visited 60 countries on 5 continents. I'm sure the number of countries has gone up from the time that I saw this on your website. All 50 of the United States and 6 Canadian provinces. That's quite extensive. What's the one best thing about travel?
It opens the mind. You get to see different places, different people, different cultures. You get to realize there's many ways of thinking of something. And it also, I would say, it's calming and it's humbling. It's calming in the sense you realize there's such beauty in nature and such tremendous diversity. And, we are like little cogs in the grand scheme of things.
I'm down to my last 2 questions. The one is, should India allow same-sex marriage?
I happen to be a libertarian kind of guy, everybody to their own. So I don't have any reason why the state should intrude into anybody's, it's only recently decriminalized homosexuality, right? We have, right?
Right, yeah, yes.
Okay. So I'm saying it's a progression, right? If you look around the history of the world, it goes from being very conservative to less and less and less. So though I'm not a union lawmaker, which is really where the question would apply, and therefore in theory I shouldn't really be answering any hypothetical questions. My philosophy is broadly to each their own. Why should I try and intrude into somebody else's life?
And my last question is what I wanted to ask you first, which is, should Elon Musk step down as Twitter CEO?
I'd say it slightly differently, right? I've seen a lot of this around the world, unfortunately, especially in the world of high finance, is that if you get successful very quickly and very successful, it's a very dangerous thing because it starts putting the notion in your head that somehow you exist in a different plane than the rest of us. And I don't mean that in terms of racism or classism. I mean, you start thinking that you're such a genius that you can't get anything wrong. Right? That you have this unique ability to always see everything perfectly and predict and manage and run and all this stuff. And I've seen it before in large hedge funds and large banks. In fact, at Lehman we saw some of that. And that almost always ends one way, right? Or in fact, every time it ends one way. The only question is how long, right? And it ends with you getting kind of way ahead of your real abilities. Because the reality is, and I'll say this in a very, very important message to the youth, the reality is that you could be successful 100 different ways through a different combination of circumstances, and you could lose or fail at something 100 different ways. So it's very hard when you're successful to either assume that you're very smart or very good or uniquely qualified. And the same way, just because you fail at something, you shouldn't let that failure determine your self-worth or your self-understanding or realization. Because nothing is permanent, right? Everything is redeemable. All failure is redeemable. All success is temporary. There's no guarantee of any of this stuff. But most people who get really successful really fast forget that. They start believing that somehow they have this unique vision and they have unique... I mean, I would think most people would agree with me that the last couple of months have not been kind to either Twitter or to Elon Musk's reputation in the world.
All right, Mr. Minister, thank you so much for being candid and speaking to Brut today.
Thank you very much.